A weekly podcast focused on personal and home technology, helping provide you, our fellow brothers and sisters in tech, with some information, assistance, and recommendations. In this episode of Brothers in Tech, Brian and I compare our essential computer applications, aka those apps that we use on a daily basis and can't or prefer not to live without. Our choices are so similar, you might even think we were related. Here on Brothers in Tech. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Brothers in Tech here on the Mesh.tv podcast network. My name is Alan Jackson, and over to my right, if you're watching on video over this way, is my brother, Brian Jackson. My brother in tech, my brother in life.
Your
my brother.
Actual brother, yeah.
Actual brother.
You could have stopped. You could have stopped it, brother. But I like how you provide all the clarifications of our brotherhood. Yeah. So
I gotta clarify for everybody. Make sure everybody knows the relationship here. Brian's out on the
West. I appreciate that you're owning all of them now. It used to not be the case.
There was a long period of time I did not acknowledge any of that, but I've gotten older. I've matured. We're in a good spot. Brian's out on the West Coast. That's one of the reasons we get along so well. We don't see each other that often. So
that's right.
Pretty much here on the screen is about the only time we really have any time to chat. All we do is talk about technology. So we figure, well, let's just go ahead and turn it into a podcast and just see what happens. For our 8 listeners or however many there are.
Oh, we've increased.
Any given time.
Cool. Okay.
Yeah. Somebody told me yesterday, they said, I listened to the show. I'm like, oh, okay. I did not. That changes things.
You're the one.
That actually is somebody that's not a family member listening to our show. That was impressive to hear. So yeah, good. If you are not a member, if you're not a member of the Jackson family and you are listening to this show, we'd like to hear from you. We'd like to know that you exist.
We'd like to know who you are.
At the end of the show, we're going to give you a way to contact us. We'd just love to hear from you. Be great.
That would be great.
To hear that.
That would be great.
So Brian, we wrestled with what we were going to talk about tonight. We've been just debating it and workshopping this episode for a really long time.
Mm-hmm.
Probably a good, 3-4 minutes before we went on the air.
Maybe 4, right?
Maybe that much.
Mm-hmm.
We figured what we would do, because honestly, we had a great topic all planned, and we realized we already did it like not too long ago. And that would have been really...
Yeah, that was my bad. That was my bad.
Look,
you mentioned the topic. You didn't catch it.
You mentioned it to me, and I'm just like, oh yeah, sure, let's do that. That sounds great. And then as soon as I'm writing the notes, I'm like, this all sounds really familiar. Like I think we went through this recently.
Yeah.
And because of the internet and everything's recorded and stored on the internet, you're able to look up and see that yes, you actually did talk about this not very long ago. So we are regrouping and we came up with, I think, a really fun idea that we're going to do that's going to dig into a little bit of more how you and I use our computers on a daily basis. So this is going to be kind of fun, I think, because we've always talked about all these topics that we want to educate people on about technology when it comes to home and personal and family technology. It's what this show's all been about. And we are constantly giving out recommendations of apps that we've started using or ones we really like. But you and I have never really traded notes on what our actual day-to-day computing life looks like the applications we use, why we use them, which ones we are using the most and for what purposes. What are those applications you and I both use that we just cannot do without or function without from an importance standpoint? So it's going to be a good time to kind of swap notes. And I'm curious, Brian, to see what you use and what your computing life looks like on a daily basis. And
I'm sure mine looks,
care about mine.
I'm sure mine looks better than yours. So whatever it is that you do, I think I do that a little bit better is basically.
Well, see, now we're actually going to have a basis to compare this.
All right.
Okay. Because before we just both lived in a world where we thought our way of computing was the best. And now we're going to be able to compare notes and know that for sure. Or not.
I'm not exactly sure I want to leave that world. I like living in that world. I like living in my little bubble to think that I do
your little bubble where everything is best for Brian. I understand.
Well, Ellen, we did do this a version of this with our phone, which I thought was actually kind of fun, where you and I did, what's on your home screen, right? Because of course for us, the apps on the home screen we consider the most important apps because we use them most often, right? So this is in a way, this is like what's on what's on your daily computer screen,
Mhm.
and how is it that we're using the computer. I think this would be fun, but I think I want to maybe challenge us a little bit toward the end
Okay.
too, to say, all right, this is what we do, these are the things we use, but could we use less, and if so, how, right? How could you trim that down a little bit if you had to, desert island sort of thing. So I think as we go through, let's try to see if we can defend what we use, and then let's see if we can figure out more efficient ways that we could do it if we had to. So I think that would be kind of interesting.
Yeah, no, I think we can do that. Absolutely. I think we can. Let's talk. I think you and I, we did talk beforehand. We probably have around maybe 6 or 7 apps that we each feel like this is our daily computing life. In other words, these are the apps we use. These are the programs that we use on our computer, and for what purposes. That if we didn't have these 7, we really aren't doing a whole lot on our computer
Right.
outside of these 7. So I think we can start with that. And then I'd like to circle back with that challenge you mentioned as well about how can we pare that down to 1, 2, or 3 apps and still feel like we can function and get anything done on our computer on a routine basis. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, and we both have them kind of ranked as well, like, most important app, most important function on our computer down to our of the 7 of the 7th most important. Not saying it's not
Right.
important, because obviously it's on the list of important apps, but least of this list.
Yeah.
So do we want to start with number 1 and just kind of throw it
I
out
think
there?
so. Let's start with number one, and let's see if we're similar at all. So,
Okay.
do you want me to
So I'll
start, or do
start.
you want to start?
I'll start.
You go.
No, I'll start.
Okay.
I'll start. So when I really look at what I do on my computer every day, and I think about the apps that I basically have open all day long. B, I am finding the most time spent on this. And I will tell you, we used a little tool to actually analyze this for our computer. If you're on a Mac, Apple computer and Mac, there's a function called screen time. Screen time is a system preference on your preferences where it is, if you have it turned on, now you do have the option of turning it off and not tracking this, but if you have it turned on, it actually is calculating for you and showing you what applications are being used and open the most on your computer at any given time. You can look at the last couple of days or the last week or so forth. So I got validation when I went into my screen time app to see that, yes, this is the app that is honestly open and running the most. And for me, it is email. I know we did a whole episode on email a while back talking about the importance of email. And yes, I know that there are moves to move away from email as such a core communication hub for us, but I'm not there yet. Email is still my bread and butter. And I have an email client. I've talked about it on the show that I've kind of had to bat around with a couple different ones due to some technical issues I was experiencing on some, but I have circled back around and I am back on Spark as my email client. And email is it's my jam, is
Yeah,
what
it's your
I'm
go-to.
is really what I could probably feel like I've spent about a third of my day just in email. For me, email is yes, of course, it's a way to receive and send messages, but it doubles a little bit sometimes as my to-do list. I mean, I kind of get things in and I have some folders I can store things in when I know that these are things I need to address or work on. Kind of becomes my little focused area of having certain things rise to the top of importance to make sure I'm addressing those and reading those. So yeah, email is my number 1. It is my most critical app for me using on a daily basis. And Brian, I'm going to guess, because I know you were a little back away from email, maybe a little bit more than I was. Is email your number 1, or you got something different for number 1?
Yeah, so interesting. Mine is Flappy Bird, and I
All
don't know.
right, I've
I
heard about
can't
that.
can't make it through the day. No, I actually debated on whether to say mine was mail or a web browser, and those
Okay,
were very close together in
yeah.
terms of, especially recently. So, as I'm sure you are, your usage probably goes through cycles depending on, this week is heavy on a certain thing, and other weeks heavy. Me especially. The last week, a couple weeks have been advising time with my students, which means
Mhm.
we're pulling up their programs through the web and looking at all the things that they need. So I had a huge amount of time spent with a web browser open, and probably more than I would normally like. But I went ahead and put that as my number one, just because I think that is one that I'm not sure I can get by without. It's the way I interact with lots of things, whether it be, Google Documents, or whether it's looking at just looking up information from the university and all that sort of stuff. So I'm going to actually, I'm going to just throw a wrench in there and say that the web browser for me is number one, and email being number two. Now, of course, I'm looking back at my last couple of days, and if I look today, both of those were about equal in the amount of time that I spent on them. If I look yesterday, it has mail was open for 9 hours and 45 minutes, and my Safari was open for an hour and a half. So yesterday, obviously, mail was the big winner, and even the day before that, I think that was similar. So, mail is always open. That's one of the tricks about looking at an app like this, is my mail is always open. And even if it's not up front, and it's constantly checking, so it thinks it's working, but
true.
So I would say, I'd say they're pretty darn close in terms of the amount of time that I'm actually engaging on material in both of those.
So what web browser are you finding yourself primarily using?
Yeah. So, a couple of episodes ago, I talked about Firefox as a pick again, right? An app that's been around for a long time that I'd started using again. And I purposely brought it up saying that it was great that you could log in, sync across devices, and you could go and log into anything on Firefox, and all of your content is there. And since that time, I've kind of bounced back to Safari a little bit, just in the last week or two, mainly because of passwords that I all had synced up through iCloud and all of that. I started realizing that not all of those were over into Firefox. But for me, Safari and Firefox are the two that I use. How about you?
Is there particular use cases where you find yourself using one or the other?
Yeah. Well, I would say, like I said, the saved passwords, which Firefox can do, but I noticed that, for example, when it's time to pay bills, and I'm logging into lots of different accounts, then I realize, oh gosh, I don't have these saved in Firefox. So let me just jump back to Safari, where I have them all saved. I can fill in the data much easier, much quicker. I can use my fingerprint to do all of that, which of course you can't do with Firefox. Firefox, if I'm going and, as I said before, teaching on campus into different locations, I'm using Firefox all the time, because that's the one I know I have my bookmarks saved across, and it's easy. It's cross-platform. So I'd say on a normal day-to-day, Safari is probably a better fit until I move over and maybe try to save more passwords within Firefox. But there is, some real efficiencies that Safari brings when you're on a Mac, in that if you have not only passwords, but you have, autofill things, you have connections with, for example, many of you may have noticed that if you're on a Mac and you are on a site where it asks for a code to be texted to you, well, if you're on your Mac and you have messages up in the background, it will actually show up as, oh, we just saw a message come in and it's got this code. Would you like us to enter that code in? And I realized that, again, with paying bills and things like that, which are always asking for some verification, again, I don't have that on Firefox, and you can't get that on Firefox. If you're on Firefox and it says enter in your code, you then have to go and actually remember the code, type it back in, like, of course, they would like you to do. But there's a lot of efficiencies that Safari can bring that Firefox cannot for me. So.
But you pretty much have both browsers at your disposal, and you use the one based on
both in my dock.
which purpose you need, and so forth.
Yep.
Well, I tell you, so my number two is, you mentioned your number one was browser, then followed by email. So my number two is my web browser as well. And I am a Safari user. So I am gonna pitch for Safari. I say Safari is probably 80% of my web browsing activity. And it's because of what you just mentioned before. It's the synergy. It's the integration with everything else. The fact that my passwords are already there. I can unlock them with my fingerprint on my laptop. So well integrated with other apps and services on the Mac. So is it the fastest browser? Not really, probably not. Is it the most full featured? Not necessarily either. But the fact that it's so just easily integrated for me makes it's kind of my default browser.
Yep.
But I will say Google Chrome, I use that other 25% of my browsing time. And it's mainly because there's 3 or 4 applications that I use that are web-based applications that will not work on Safari. So I do keep Google Chrome around for that purpose. YouTube TV. If I wanted to watch YouTube TV on my computer, can't do it on Safari. So I have to have Google Chrome open to watch that. There QuickBooks Online. I use QuickBooks for a lot of my accounting work, for financial management for my companies and all. It'll work on Safari. It's just very buggy, and Chrome is a lot more stable with it. So I keep it on Chrome. So again, Chrome I use for very specific applications and purposes, where Safari is kind of my default. If I want to open up a browser, I click on Safari and I go. But combined, web browsing is kind of my second most popular productive item on my desktop computing.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Now you mentioned
that makes sense.
Yeah, you mentioned mail as kind of your number 2. What email program are you using at the moment?
So I'm using actually the built-in mail, and of course, I'm someone who pushed you originally to go outside of mail, and I think kind of led you to Spark where you are now. But so I've kept with mail, and it's because of one reason. Mail works seamlessly with my university's email system. And there's one very specific thing that happens, and it doesn't work on Spark, and it doesn't work on a couple of other of those unique email clients, which is utilizing the university's directory. So for example, if I pull up in mail, pull up a new email and I start typing names, it will go ahead and search all the names in the university system as well as my contact list. So if I said Alan, of course you'll come up first because it thinks you're very important. But then as you go down, I can see all the Allens in the university system as well. And that's automatically there for me to scroll through. And for me, given that I work with students all the time and I don't have them in my contact list, and if someone says, hey, I need an email, I can start typing their name and not have to go and do a directory search somewhere in order to be able to send that email. Spark doesn't do that. They don't work very well with our directory system. If they did, I would be right back to it. And I guess I need to check that again, because we have changed our backend system recently, which may help that. But that was a big. I mean, that was just a huge loss when I'm typing an email trying to remember. Oh, I need to send it to it's Johnny someone, and now realize, well, they don't populate, so I have to go and do another search somewhere else in a different app, in Contacts app or something like that. So mail allows me to do that. Like I said, if another one was able to do it, like Spark or one of the others, I would be using that, because I love the features that Spark has. The snooze feature and other things that I tend to use even on my mobile, but unfortunately can't do it with mail. So for me, it's mail. And Alan, you correct? You're still using Spark?
I am. So Spark is working good for me. There's my light back. Spark is I've still got one issue with Spark. I have continued to talk with the people in charge of the Spark app about my concerns, because I think I mentioned to you a while back that I was using this app. I love it. It's the best email app I've got. However, it does allow you to snooze emails, meaning you tell it you want to have an email leave your inbox and come back at another time you specify, because you don't need to deal with it right now. If I get an email that says, hey, reminder, there's an event going on Thursday night, like, well, I don't really need to be reminded about that until Thursday morning. So just go ahead and remind me Thursday morning instead. The problem with Spark, I've noticed, is that I have still some random emails I will snooze that will get, even though I'll snooze them to a particular date and time, when I go look for them later in my snooze folder to make sure that they're there and that they are going to pop up at the right time, they've been relabeled as someday, which means they're never going to pop back up in my inbox. And that has happened on occasion, and it's not just me. Other people online have said that they've had an issue with it. I tried other email apps, and I just could not find anything I liked as much as Spark. And I gotten so used to Spark already. I bit the bullet and came back. I just have to, unfortunately, every day I go into my snoozed mail folder, and if I see one got tagged as someday, I go in and re-snooze it, which is a pain.
Yeah.
I'm really hoping that gets fixed soon, but I had to just weigh it between other email programs I had, and Spark still had everything I needed otherwise. So, yep. So that's good for me. I don't have the university system or any kind of network I have to connect into with the directory at all. So I don't have that limitation like you do. Otherwise, I totally understand. I would probably go back to the stock email app as well. So
yeah, and as I mentioned, I'm just having you bring this up again is going to make me go back and see if somehow in the last 6 months since I've tried Spark, maybe they've updated their system to be able to work with me a little better. But because I loved it. I loved using it. I loved the snooze feature. I love some of the mobile features that allowed you to do a lot of different things with an email. I still haven't tried it yet, but the ability to work with someone on an email and kind of connect with you and I connecting, and we're making a group email together or writing an email. There's just a lot of great things that I think eventually Apple and kind of the built-in mail will take advantage of. But they're kind of ahead of the curve, which is great. So, but no, we're certainly on the same boat. We can't live without email or a web browser.
I think so that's basically it. And again, I really thought about it for a little bit after I came up with this list and said, okay, so basically my two most important apps are ones that they're not really specific work related apps for me. They're very universal apps. I mean, a web browser and an email program, pretty universal. But I think it speaks to the fact that we still rely on email for so much of our communications. And then B, the web browser. Yes, I think we're past the days where the web browser is just you go to read web pages. Yeah. I mean, we're now actually running apps on our web browser. Yep. And I'd say, half of the apps and programs I use are actually web-based programs. So I use the web browser predominantly for that. So I understand why it's kind of grown in importance even more so for both of us. Yeah. So let's kind of work down the list a little further. So we are both in the same camp on 1 and 2, just maybe a little flip-flopped on the 2. But when we get to number 3, my third most critical app is my calendar app. And I'm using Fantastical as my calendar. We talked about that a few episodes ago. I was singing its praises after you kind of encouraged me to check it out, and I did, and really like it as a calendar app. The reason it's number 3 for me is I'm a very heavy calendar user. If you were to see my calendar, you'll see it is a lot of items on it, a lot of details, a lot of I've got multiple calendars I'm keeping up with: a home calendar, a family, a work one. I run a film society which has its own calendar I have to keep up with. We've got a podcast production schedule I keep up with as a calendar. It is my way of always knowing what's going on, not only with my schedule, but the people around me that I depend on or need to work with. And plus, Fantastical has a nice functionality where it can also tie in your to-do items from your Apple to-do app. So the idea being that if you have any to-do items on your Apple to-do built-in stock to-do application, it can actually bring those into the calendar. If you have like a due date for that to-do item, it'll actually show it on your calendar for that day as a item for that day, which that's the first time I've seen a calendar really do that and make sense the way it does it. So overall, can I live with my calendar like on its own? No, it's dependent on a lot of other things for me to get things done. But when I look at truly like what I spend a lot of time in and planning my days and managing my workload, and calendars pretty heavy use for me. So and Fantastical has been really nice to use. It's a little sluggish.
Isn't it? Yeah,
it is. It's a little sluggish on my laptop. I'll give you that. But part of it probably is my laptop's getting pretty old. But I have noticed probably the sheer number of calendars I have on it and items, and then trying to flip through days, I notice gets really sluggish. And I'm due for an upgrade on my laptop, and maybe that'll help fix that. But that's my only drawback on it, is just sometimes trying to scroll through days up and down in a day, or drag items to another day, is really slow for me. It gets a little sluggish and a little frustrating, but
yeah,
otherwise it's a great app. It's a great app.
No, it is amazing. It's an amazing app, and I appreciate now that 2 of your top 3 apps are apps that I got you to buy into. So
That's
I'm
true.
pretty proud of
It is
that.
true.
Pretty proud of
No,
that.
you're right. You're right. Spark email program and
Yeah,
Fantastical are both ones you kind of encouraged me to check out, and I'm glad
Yep.
I did.
And scene. Yes, that's all we can do. We just stop. No, actually, I use Fantastical and have been for many years, and it is. I put it down as my number 4.
Okay.
Even though I would say I shudder to think of going through the day without using it, and it's incredibly helpful. But for me, number 3 is, and I'm kind of grouping Microsoft Office all into one. And I know that there's different apps in there: Word, Excel, PowerPoint. But I use all 3 of those every single day, and in probably equal use for work. So I'm not necessarily proud of it, because I would love to, maneuver to maybe some more creative uses, like using Pages and Keynote and some of the things that can be a little bit more visually appealing. Work is still, or in Microsoft Word and Microsoft Office itself is still a little bland, and it is kind of been around and hasn't really, changed a lot over the last many years. But I think that's why, especially in a university system, that I still use it, because everybody else uses it, and
Right.
it's easy to send documents between the two. When you send a Word doc to someone, they can open it because they've got Microsoft Word as well.
Yeah.
So for me, that's still, that's the one of all of the, actually, yeah, all the apps on my list, that's the one that if I could get away from them, I would. Because I'd love to shift to something more creative.
So you're saying you're using it kind of begrudgingly. You'd rather
Totally.
not have to use
Totally.
it.
Yep.
That's
I would
interesting.
love to use, not use Excel and use Sheets or use numbers. Something that can do some of the same things, but do them a little bit more creatively and potentially more exciting ways. And this really is kind of I have to use this, and I don't see myself getting away from it for quite a while. But it's my number 3, then Fantastical being my number 4, because I love the app, and I love what it does for me, even though there's a built-in version of the calendar on Apple that's decent, and there's all sorts of ways I could have gotten that same info, but I just love what Fantastical does as well.
Yeah. The Apple Calendar app is fine, and I used it up until Fantastical. I started looking at Fantastical because the Apple Calendar app, again, it's all about bugs for me. Whenever I start to encounter some issues and bugs, the Apple Calendar app would constantly, even if I changed the time of an event, I'd drag to another time. It would sometimes, because of whether it's doing syncing in the background, it would revert it back to the original time that I had it at. And it would do that a lot, like constantly, to the point where it was really aggravating, sometimes trying to change times on an event. So that caused me to start looking, and I'm glad I did, because Fantastical is already so much better for it.
Yeah. Alan, can I mention one really quick thing about Fantastical? Sure. And I don't know if you use this or not, but I just realized it the other day, because Fantastical is one of those that, since I've been using it so long, I don't typically go into the preferences to see what new things are there, because I just have the way that I use it. And I told you a long time ago that the reason I got Fantastical the very first time was because of the menu bar. Right, having my calendar in the menu bar to where I can do a keystroke and it drops down. Right, that was the whole reason I got it to begin with. And I just realized the other day that another app that I had on my computer for a menu bar application, which was called Up Next, I was using that, which all it does is in the menu, it would tell you what your next meeting is on your calendar. And it says, in 22 minutes, you have this.
Yeah.
Well, Fantastical now does that. And I didn't realize it did. So I found that out the other day, that not only can I have the menu bar calendar that's up there that tells me, what today's date is, and I can just see the number. And then when I do a drop down, I can actually see the calendar. But right next to it, I have what's up next in my calendar. And I'm like, oh, I'm so happy, because now I get rid of that other app, which really, wasn't needed, and have it all working together. So,
well, it does that. And also, I think maybe another setting that you can have is like now, I don't have it showing my next upcoming meeting up in my menu bar, but if something I've got coming up is a Zoom or WebEx or something to join into, it does change up there at the top, give me that indication, and lets me go kind of one click to go right into it, which is nice.
That's really nice.
It's a great app. I'm really enjoying it quite a bit.
Yep.
Now, you mentioned Microsoft Office as kind of your number.
Is that in yours at all?
It is just a part of it. Microsoft Excel specifically for me. So I'm gonna say to you, kind of piggyback on what you were saying about you wish you could use other apps or get away from it. I agree with you on Microsoft Word. Pages I enjoy using so much more than Microsoft Word. I use Microsoft Word because the same reason you said, is that it's universal. Everybody has it. I don't have to worry about if I send them a document, whether or not they can open it or not. And, people are constantly getting advice from me on working in something in Word. And of course I need to have it up and running to be able to, do that, to help them with it. And I feel the same way about Keynote over PowerPoint. I would much rather use Keynote than PowerPoint, but I will keep PowerPoint around in case I know I've got to make something that I need to send to somebody else for them to work on as well.
Yeah.
But the one app I will say, Microsoft, I cannot get into numbers, and it's because of Microsoft Excel. I am Brian, my day consists of about 50% of my time is working on data and survey data analysis and reporting. And Microsoft Excel is that is my singular app for doing almost everything I do on that side of the work. It's a very work specific application need for me, but it's there and it's important. And I've tried using Numbers, the Apple built-in Numbers app. And yes, it'll make things pretty, but it doesn't have that same functionality. I still find myself feeling like my hands are tied a little bit, because I do get pretty deep into Excel, working in a lot of things. For me, Excel, sometimes it doubles as my word processor. Sometimes I will use Excel to put together what you may consider to be a Word document, but I just need it formatted in a way that's a little more grid and a little more control over how things are formatted. And I feel like I can do it better in Excel sometimes than I can Word. So Excel, I was surprised how much I use it when I looked at my stats, but it's pretty heavy use on my computer. So I could probably do without Word and PowerPoint if I had to, and just use the built-in Apple apps and be fine. But Excel, I don't see how I could get away from that. It's Numbers has still just not come around, or even Google's spreadsheets, Google Sheets.
Yeah,
they're just still not anywhere in the ballpark for me on where Excel can go and what you can do with it. So
I think you're probably right there. I do think some of it feels that way to me because I'm just comfortable and used to what Excel does, or the same thing with PowerPoint, right? I mean, for me, I'm on PowerPoint all the time, with teaching classes, but and I find that I'm slow and clunky putting together a keynote, even though it's going to be so much nicer and so much more appealing, and it has more functions that I would love to be able to use, like live video and all of that you can put into those keynote presentations. But I just have my system in place to where I know I can double click here and I can slide here, and all of that's going to work in a particular way. So that's still why, Excel is super clean and easy for me, as I can use it, and I know my keystrokes, and I know what's going to get, how to make certain little things happen. So it'll take me a while for sure to move away from Office, but I'm hoping that can continue to chip away, maybe one app at a time, and eventually get to the point where I'm, making all of my documents in the other format. So,
it would be nice. It'd be nice.
Yeah.
We're getting there. All right. So that was my number 4, Microsoft
Okay.
Excel.
So really,
you
R1
mentioned
and 2 were swapped, R3 and 4 were swapped, right? But with
basically,
the same top 4.
you're a little heavier on Word, on Office, and I'm a little heavier on Excel, but still, Microsoft is still a key application used for us.
Yeah.
So we're both kind of caught up on our top 4. Now, after that, my number 5 is it's a communications app, and we've talked about it on a previous show, as most of these I think we have. It is Slack. So I do find myself in the world of Slack pretty often. I mean, it's another app that I have open all day long for various reasons. And let me go ahead and bring up a little slide about it in case anybody's still not familiar with what we're talking about with Slack. Slack, for those not familiar, is a communication kind of hub application. What it's meant for is it is a free app. I mean, there is a paid version of it, but otherwise, if you don't use it too extensively with too many messages or too much history behind it, you can use it for free. And the idea is that you can get members of your team, and your team can consist of whatever you want it to be. It could be coworkers. Or Brian, you and I have a Slack channel set up for this show that you and I use for sometimes notes and sharing links with one another. I've got one with my film society, so people involved in that. I've got a Slack community that I've formed with them. And then there's a couple pastimes like college basketball, my Carolina Tar Heels. There's actually a Slack I'm a part of where people with a similar topic and interest, we can all swap ideas and talk. But Slack is great because it keeps up with, threads of communications between people. You can have a direct one-to-one dialogue with one person, or you can broadcast out something in a channel that multiple people can see, anybody who is subscribed to that channel within your group. And you can send files, you can send links, you can send media back and forth. They've even rolled out where if you click a button, you can do a video call or audio call from within Slack. So it kind of doubles as your own internal Zoom or video conferencing platform in a way. It's a fun app to use. So I think it's kind of fun to use. I use it with my coworkers in the office. So we all have a Slack channel I'm on. Again, I mentioned the one for this show, my film society work, and then a couple of just pastime ones where I don't do a lot of posting, but I do a lot of reading, and we'll kind of check in with what other people are saying about these topics. And so right now, I think at any given time, I've got 5 or 6 like groups in Slack at one time that I could toggle between and check out communications with. So it's a fun app. I really thoroughly enjoy using it. It has kind of replaced messages for me for my team communications.
Okay. Yeah.
Messages, text messages I still use for anybody outside of those groups, but within my colleagues, within my people within these other groups I'm a part of, Slack is the way we dialogue more than not. So yeah. So that's mine there.
Yeah.
Is Slack one of your top apps?
It is.
No?
It is not. It is not.
Okay.
The only time I use Slack now is with you, and we use it at a very limited level, you and I, which is, I pass documents to you and back and forth. But I would like to. It is something that I would love to see, go away from email and move towards kind of group organization communication that way. But I don't use it yet. But as I said, I would love to. I just find myself that using it with most of the groups that I'm interacting with at work, they're never going to use it. So okay. I'm fine myself doing it.
Slack is not a great app if you just are the only one using it. It's kind of pointless at that point. So you do have to have other people buying into it. Now, I'll say this about Slack. You mentioned about getting away from email, and that is one thing I've had to kind of work with everybody around me that we're on Slack with. It's very tempting to go into Slack and send somebody, hey, can you get this for me? Or can you send me this? Or can you do this for me? But then, we also still have email as a communication platform. And to me, email is much more of a I can see everything that's being sent to me, and I can prioritize and organize those emails in the order I need to. Slack doesn't quite work that way. It's really more of like you are on various message chains with other people. So the one thing I've had to be very careful about and kind of ask everybody to do is don't use Slack to send me a to-do item. Don't send me a Slack message asking me to do something that I need to do by next week or whatever. I need an email for that, because otherwise the Slack, I mean, once you've said it, and then if you say something else, just like a text message,
It's
it's
on the
gone.
list.
It's scrolled
Yeah,
up
yeah, yeah, yeah.
unless I manually go in there and say, set me a reminder on this message that they just sent me and remind me about this message like a week later. So I do have to be very careful about it. I don't, I'm afraid sometimes it's easy to miss things in Slack that you need to do or follow up on. So I do ask people not to use Slack to send me a to-do item.
Yeah.
But at least if they're just asking a question, they need to know something. Hey, what was the last time you talked to this client? Have you heard about this? Oh, hey, here's a link to a great article I just read. Check it out. Those are great things to share in Slack. And that's really what that kind of community dialogue is for in an app like that.
Yeah.
But I don't think it quite doubles as a to-do list item or as a way of organizing messages and organizing things that people are sending you like email does. So.
Yeah, let me just make a quick plug on. It's not an app, but and I use it's an app on my phone, but it's not an app on the computer. It goes through a website. But I do a very similar thing with GroupMe, and GroupMe is a website that allows you to cross-platform, basically send messages to a large group of people, and you can have that stream of messages continue to go. So it's your messages app, but it's messages that are really geared towards groups and teams, right? Kind of GroupMe. And I started using that when I started coaching again, because with my players, then it would get to them with a notification pretty easily. But I had one for the coaches, one for the players, one for the coaches and the players. They were just different streams that were always available, and I didn't want to have to continue to look for through my messages list of all the messages to try to go back to that address and all that sort of thing. So, and they were already using it. It's a kind of a clean. It also nice to be able to work with people that maybe you don't want on your cell phone all the time, that you can still kind of turn on and off when you want to receive messages from these folks. So I think it's a different way. It's not like Slack in that it's not built for websites and documents and that sort of thing. You can attach things, but it really is strictly just, messages to a large group that can be done in a couple of different ways. So I use that as probably a similar way that you're using Slack, but maybe might be helpful for some people, especially when you're going cross-platform messages and you want to keep them off of your text message string.
I had never heard of that app, so great call on that. I'll have to check that out.
Yeah,
it's interesting.
So I'll give you my number, since Slack is not in my list at all, but I'll give you my number 5.
Yep,
this is
your
my
number 5 app.
Yeah, and so this is for my task, keeping my tasks straight, and I use an app called Things. And Alan, I know you and I've talked about this before. I think you've used Things before. I think we're on Things 3 now. I think version 3. But this is, I will go ahead and say, I'll be completely upfront that I use it, and I don't use it to its capabilities. It has a lot of capabilities that I just don't use, and I wish I would focus myself to be able to use it. But I use it strictly as a to-do list. But I like the fact that this to-do list can integrate with lots of other things on my computer. So what this is Things is, I'll pull up this and have this on my computer all day long, just as a window in the background. It is anytime that I have something I need to do, I'll go in, click, say plus, add a note. This is what I need to do. And right underneath it, say, when do I need to do it? And I can click one button and see a calendar and click and say, I need to do it on that day. And then it goes away off that today list. And then it'll come back in on whatever day I ask it to. Has a checkbox. Once I check it off, it comes off of my list. It's just super simple. But what I like about it compared to some of the other to-do lists is that it has some sub bullets that you can have. Let's say that I have a project that I need to make sure I'm working, but the project has 5 different components. And well, I'll give you an example. I have some research students that I needed to read and grade their proposals, and there's 5 of them. And so grading proposal was my to-do. And then when I click on it, it drops down a checklist underneath of all their names, so I can check which one of them. And then, of course, it doesn't all go away until I knock them all out.
Sure.
But what's probably really cool about this one, and I don't use it to the extent that I should, but anything else that I'm doing on the computer, like if I'm on an email and I see that email needs to be related to something that I need to do in the future, there are ways to have kind of a keystroke in other apps where, for me, I think it's a Shift Command T, and it pulls up a little floating window that says, okay, let's make a to-do list or to-do that's based on this email. And it has a link that it embeds within the to-do that takes you back to that email. So now I could have in my to-do list, do this particular thing. And in order to do that thing, I need to go back and look at that email. I can click on the link within the to-do and it takes me back specifically to that email. So, there are little things that I've gotten really used to using with it, and it's clean. And I like the fact that it's, an app that's on my phone, it's on my iPad, it's on my computer. It all syncs up across apps. Now, you can do most of this stuff with the built-in reminders app within Mac, but not to the extent, right? Not to the some additional.
Not to the extent. No, when you talk about having to-do items with sub bullets underneath it, you can't really pull that off in the stock reminders app. Also, one thing I know Things does that I really liked, and the to-do app I use now has the same functionality, is I can have different kind of focus areas. So, for example, if I want to put something in a kind of a grouping for home items, I can have my own set of to-do items and list within the home area, but I can have a whole nother grouping for work, and just really keep them kind of separated. I know you can create separate to-do list in the Apple Reminders app, but I just like the idea of having it kind of all under one umbrella. It's like, all right, I'm at home, so I only need to look at anything in my home universe of to-do items. I don't want to see any of my work ones, and vice versa. So it is kind of nice. It gives you like 3 or 4 levels of grouping, which is where I think it really excels as a nice to-do app. So yeah.
So that's big. That's important because it's on my computer all the time, and that's what's keeping me organized.
Sure, it is an honorable mention for me. Not Things. I use one called To Do, which is the number 2 DO, but its functionality is very, very similar to Things. And I use that is my number 8. If we were to go to 8, it would be up there. My problem is I don't use it as effectively as I should. So unfortunately, a day will go by and I did not open the to-do app, and I have to go back and change everything to reflect new due dates. And that's never fun, and it gets me frustrated, and that's my own doing. So I've got to get better with that.
All right.
So that was your number
5. That was my number 5.
That's your number 5. Yes.
That's my number 5. Mm-hmm.
Great. Well, let's go ahead and I got to get into one that I know you're not going to have, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it because it's a very specific for me work related app, but it is one I am in every single day and using. Let's see where I've got it here. I know I've got it somewhere on the. So here it is. So I mentioned that half my day is spent on data and analysis of data and reporting and so forth. The other half the day is working in video. I shoot, record, produce video for a lot of different clients or for projects I'm working on. And Final Cut Pro is the app for me that I use. It is a more pro level app for video editing. I don't recommend it for anybody who just wants to do casual video editing. They just want to take home movies and edit them together. There are some great, more consumer level apps for that. Even Apple has one called their iMovie app, which is a great app. It works beautifully for people who just want to dabble in editing. but for me, I do have to have a little higher capacity to work in. But this is honestly up in my computer 6 hours a day, running or doing something. So whether I'm editing this show, we're putting together a video version of this show, whether I'm producing some things for some clients, or we just finished recording some events and I need to edit them down and put them back up on YouTube. So Final Cut is my jam for that. And this, I love the fact that, this is an app that, Brian, used to be over $1,000 years ago. And it used to be you plunk down $1,000 and then there would be an upgrade every couple of years, which was the upgrade would cost a couple $100.
Crazy.
Nowadays, you can buy one time $300, which is still an expensive app, but $300 one time and it's upgraded forever. I bought Final Cut Pro 10 years ago, maybe, and haven't had to pay for it again since. And
so they have not moved to a subscription model like many others have. Okay.
Apple's Pro apps are one-time purchases. And so I hope that keeps, because I don't, I like having already put my investment in and not having to do it again every year.
Yeah.
But it's a great deal. So if you're dabbling in video and editing and you feel like maybe the consumer level tools are just not giving you all the bells and whistles and functionality you want, and you're on a Mac, Final Cut Pro is a great application. It's probably my favorite application to use, just in terms of getting in and just really working with. So, but again, I know that's going to be a little more unique for me. So,
that's not in my list. I actually have never used Final Cut Pro. So there you go. All right.
Yeah, that's out there
in my list.
So that is my number 6. Okay. Brian, where are you with your
my number 6 is one that also I would say is somewhat begrudgingly that I'm using a lot, and it probably could be much further up in my list depending on the week, is Zoom. I am on Zoom a lot.
The old Zoom.
Yes. Yeah. I am, many meetings are on Zoom these days. And I'll say begrudgingly, but I also say I'm very, very happy with the fact that I have Zoom. And there are, I think it works really well. I think they've done a nice job of continuing to update and stay current and making sure that they're squashing bugs. I think it's begrudgingly, it's just about being on video conferencing in general.
Right. I was going to say the problem. Yeah. The problem, I'm with you. Zoom is actually my number 7. So that's going to be the last one I'll bring up as well. And I'm with you. I don't think the problem is Zoom. The problem is just that we're having to do video conferencing and dealing with the inherent issues that come along with video conferencing on its own. But I tell you, of all the platforms I've used, Zoom is still, to me, the most reliable.
Yeah.
It has been the one that has the least amount of fail points to it. And I think, it's also kind of, people know how to use it. So I don't find a lot of people jumping into a Zoom room having to figure things out as much, which is nice. So
other than turning off their mute, which is always a challenge.
But that's for any of these apps. That's everyone.
No. Again, I can't complain about Zoom itself. I just I wish I didn't have to be on virtual calls all the time. But no, I think it works incredibly well. And there are initially some tricky pieces of using Zoom with external monitors and all of that sort of thing. But once you get the hang of it, which they did a really good job of grabbing the large market share early on and being the big players when, the pandemic hit. So I think you're right. Everybody knows how to use it. And if you would have done this 3 years ago and said to someone trying to schedule a meeting with you, Alan, hey, do you want to just Zoom? It would have taken them forever, a non-user, to try to figure out how to get on and all that sort of thing. Nowadays, it doesn't matter who it is. You could say, I'll see you on Zoom, and everybody seems to know. So I think, So it's down on my list because I may be wishful thinking that I wouldn't need it as much day to day, but I do. I use it daily, and
I'm there with you. Great. I had 3 Zoom meetings just today, and it's up and running. It's pretty active on mine as well. I do shudder sometimes when I get invited to a meeting that's not on Zoom. I'll tell you what, Microsoft Teams, I've gotten invited to a lot of Microsoft team meetings. For whatever reason, I have seemed to have the most problems when I try to connect with an external microphone and all on Microsoft Teams. It just, it only works half the time for me. And then Google Meet, I think I love the idea of Google having a in-browser kind of ready to go video conferencing, but it's also been extremely unreliable quality wise for me. So Zoom's the only one I feel like I've got a pretty good sense of consistency of how good it's going to work when I use it. So
let's see. I'll go the next one,
last
Alan.
one.
Yeah, my last one was a little tricky in that I don't necessarily have to have it up on my computer, but I really like having it up on my computer, and that is Messages. Messages as being the Messages app, and I'll tell you, Alan, the reason I like having it on to me it was a game changer when I was able to put the Messages app on my computer, because I'm still a person who doesn't like texting. Finger typing
you don't like the
annoying just finger texting. Yeah, I do it, and I do it quite a bit throughout the day if I need to, if I've got my phone on me. But the ability to, I'll have some, Alan, where I'm away from my computer. Yes, I see a text come in, and if I know that I'm going to get back to my computer in the next 10 or 15 minutes, I will hold off and I will answer a bunch of texts that way, because I'd much rather type on a keyboard than I would type on my phone. So the ability for being able to actually say things appropriately, see it appropriately without having to strain my eyes to see what's on the phone. It's great. And so having that was kind of a game changer as being my communication capability, and took away some of my use of email. I've got both of them up. And if it's somebody that's, a friend of mine, I actually prefer sending them the message, because I can type out the same information, put the link in, all of that stuff easily that I would have done in an email. And I know that, maybe it's a preferred method of communication with them. So to me, it's become, very close connection to even email. Email is certainly more work-based, obviously, but Messages for me is anything outside of that, as long as I have it up on my computer to where I can use my keyboard and I'm not having to just type with my fingers. I enjoy it. So the Messages app on the computer has been kind of a game changer for me.
Well, I'm with you on that. I do keep the Messages app running on my computer whenever I'm working during the day, or at my computer in general. And I'm with you as well. I much rather prefer to type out things with a keyboard into that app. I'll tell you what has been a awesome little setup for me lately, just even the last couple of weeks, since Apple rolled out the universal control, which we talked about a few weeks ago on an updates episode, where I can have my iPad just sitting up next to my computer when I'm working. I actually keep the Messages app over on the iPad and running on the iPad. And then that way, if I am working and a message comes in, I can still use my keyboard and mouse to slide over to my iPad, and I can type my responses on the iPad version of it, which is great. So it gives me the same functionality that the desktop does, but it doesn't take up any real estate on my computer. I've got it kind of off to the side. So I'm able to focus in on what I'm doing work-wise, but yet if I do want to hop over here and check a message or respond to somebody, I have it on its own side screen on an iPad format, which is just kind of fun. Another way to use it, another way to think about using Messages. But I'm with you in that I do have it open pretty often on that. So
So we're not that different there. I think we only had one each that was really unique from one another, maybe two.
What I think is interesting, Brian, as we talk about which apps we're using the most, other than me bringing up Final Cut Pro, which is a very task specific, very focused type of work program, everything else is either about communications, email, Spark, Messages, Zoom, all that is all about communications, or it's very general, broad, like web browser, to use for things. And it's interesting that that's the apps we still find ourselves using the most. I don't know. It's just interesting. I wouldn't think, web, again, like I said, years ago, I don't think anybody would have said that the web browser would be one of our number one
No.
productivity and kind of useful apps, but nowadays it is.
Sure. Yeah. No. If you asked me 5 years ago, even I would probably have it down at 4 or 5 on my list. So, and I think a lot of that is because, as you said, it's become not just about going and searching for information,
And
but
not just
now
about
every
reading things. It's
right and
interacting
business
with
things that you're
now.
actually doing can
Yeah.
actually be done there. So Alan, let's but before we wrap up here, we did mention how I want us to challenge us a little bit. So to see of these, what's the fewest? If I told you had to still do the job that you do, right? You still have to do everything that you do, but I'm going to make you trim down the number of apps that you have. How few apps could you get by with?
I could get by with, I'm going to say 4.
Ooh, okay.
Get down to 4. I thought about this. Okay. I have to have email. I mean, that is still my default communication. If I didn't have email, trying to think about doing all the productive work on email I do now, but doing it in messages or doing it in any other place, I couldn't do it.
Okay.
I've got to have the web browser because right now it's too many functions, too many applications, too many things I depend on are through the web browser.
Okay.
And then my 2 work related apps that are specific to the job I do that I don't have a replacement for, couldn't do without: Microsoft Excel, Final Cut Pro. I could do without the calendar app if I had to.
Yeah.
I wouldn't enjoy it, but I could do it.
Yeah.
I could do without Zoom and just tell you that, nope, I'm only doing phone calls and I'm only doing in-person meetings. I'm not doing any Zoom calls. But that's it. I mean, I could get rid of those, and I could get rid of Slack. Slack is nice, but it's not mission critical that I can't function without it. So I could get rid of 3 of the 7, but I've got to have those 4 to do anything that I do and be at all productive in what I do for a living. So what about you?
Okay. Well, I'm gonna see your 4, and I will lower you to 1. I think if you force me to, I could do everything that I do on a browser.
Because you can do your email through the browser.
Yeah, I could have an email on one window.
You could do your Google Docs instead of Microsoft Word.
I could go Google Meet. You
could have your calendar.
Google Docs. I could have the calendar on a window.
Oh, see, you thought about it in a smarter way than I did. You're right.
Well,
You're right.
mean, that makes sense. Yeah, but
the only things I can't do in a browser that I mentioned up above are
Final Cut,
my video editing, and Microsoft Excel.
Yeah.
So I would have to be
your
down
Excel.
3.
Yeah. I could
be down
probably
to 3.
shift to Sheets if I needed to for some of the things that I do. But and of course there's a couple of apps that are down kind of below the fold here that I've got some statistical software that I use I use quite a bit with my research. But yeah, I think this is the creative part about now for people. Well, and actually I was thinking about this, Alan. If I gave you a Chromebook,
yeah,
that's exactly what you would be doing, right?
Well,
you'd be
that's
doing
what I was going to say, is
the
that
browser.
you basically created the example where that is how Chrome is intending to work as an operating system. Is it's just a browser. And you're right. If you can check your email through a web browser, you can work on word processing docs in a web browser. You can have a to-do item functionality somewhere in a web browser. You can do video conferencing within a web browser. Yeah. So it's like, you're right. You basically have described what the Chrome OS that, a lot of students are using with laptops that are provided to them by the schools are all based on that Google's Chrome OS, which is just a browser running on a computer, but the browser gives you a lot of that capability. So you're right. Yeah.
And you know what, Alan, all of those things could have been done 7 years ago through a browser as well, but not nearly as efficiently as they are now. When the browsers, the HTML started allowing drag and drop and all of these things that make it feel like a normal app, like you pull up a web or you pull up an email on the web browser now, and you can drag things into folders and all of that, which before it was, okay, I'm going to click on this. It's going to bring up a new window. I'm going to have to do that. It's, once that started happening, I started realizing it's not the worst thing in the world if I'm stuck or if I'm stuck on someone else's computer and need to go through their web browser to get to my email, to my things.
And think about this. I mean, we've talked in the past, Brian, about kind of a perfect world computing scenario where it's almost like the computer is, it's more of whether your phone is kind of, or your portable device, you can come up and dock at a computer, and then all of your files, all of your everything of yours, doesn't matter what computer you go up to, it just, everything looks the same once you pop in your phone and you dock it there. Well, the web browser is kind of that same functionality. If you can log in to your web browser, log into Chrome, and Chrome knows all of your settings, it knows all of your bookmarks, it knows all of the places, your passwords. So then you've logged in on somebody else's computer, you can get kind of close to that kind of idea. So you're right. The web browser does kind of change the game on that for us. And again, I just can't do high-end data analysis work, and I can't do video editing on a browser. But otherwise, you're right. I could do everything else.
Yeah. So, I mean, we'll be, we'll have to check in if we're still doing this podcast in a couple of years, God forbid. You and I can do this again and see if we've actually moved more fully to the browser, because I believe that if anything, it's going to continue to go in that direction, where the browser is just going to become much more powerful, much more useful, much more app-like.
I can see that.
I think, and again, when we're getting to the point where it used to be the internet was our barrier, like I didn't want to be stuck somewhere that didn't have internet and not be able to use the browser, which is where I was doing the work. So I always wanted things local. I wanted local apps. I wanted local copies. Now there's very few times where I can't get on a Wi-Fi signal or, go through a hotspot of my phone, and my phone has a signal. So I think we're getting closer. We're getting closer to that. So,
I completely agree. I'm with you 100%. I think we're on the same page with that.
All right.
Well, that is kind of our makeup of our computing life. And it sounds like we're fairly similar on many items there, but a couple of unique ones between us. And
mine was a little better, but that's kind of to be expected. And
we'll let the listeners decide. Let the listeners decide which one is more like their day-to-day work. Or
do we have an odd number of listeners now? I knew it used to be 6. Is it 7 now, so that we can actually break a tie?
I hope we can get a tiebreaker in there. Yeah, that would be nice.
All right.
Well, Brian, if anybody wants to maybe kind of inquire about any of the apps or functions we were talking about, maybe ask some questions, or maybe there's what's your favorite app? What's an app that you find yourself using a lot more on your day-to-day basis, that whether it's so unique to you or something more universal that maybe we haven't considered or haven't found ourselves using quite as much yet, but could be in the future? Let's talk about it. Tell us about it. So, Brian, how can they reach out to us?
Yeah, well, if you are one of those non-family members that actually listens to the podcast, we'd love to hear from you. Send us an email at info@themesh.tv, info@themesh.tv, and we will gladly kind of try to integrate some of your thoughts and suggestions into the show. You can also go to our website, which is www.brothers-n-tech.com. And you can get earlier episodes, go back and take a look at what we've been doing before. And
there's a contact form also on the website where you can reach out to us as well if you'd rather do that. So, so we this was kind of fun. It's always nice kind of peering behind the curtain a little bit and seeing what we're doing in our daily life.
Well, I mean, I think our preparation really showed in this one. I mean, I think it shows that as we prepare heavily as we did, it comes across, very clean.
It's basically, when we said we need a topic, I honestly just looked at around my computer. I'm like, well, let's just talk about what's up on our screens right now. That was basically our episode.
Yeah.
Not too bad. And we talked for our typical 1 hour about it. So what do you know?
Well, of course we did. Of course we did. Yeah.
All right. Well, we're going to sign off. Thanks so much for watching or listening, whichever you chose to do. And we'll be back soon with another episode. I think we have a suggestions episode coming up soon.
Yes,
I believe.
Yes,
it might be next in line for us to do a Brothers in Tech suggestions, where we both recommend something an app. It will not be one of the 7 we've talked about here today. It'll be something either newer or something we've been trying out or using or want to really brag about to people, and see if we can convince the other one of us to splurge to get it as well. So stay tuned for that. That should be coming up here in the next week or 2. But otherwise, we will talk to you next time. Thanks for watching or listening to Brothers in Tech here on themesh.tv.
Bye-bye.